Hey everyone, welcome to another sort of podcasty chat edition on touchscreen. This time we're talking about the National Touch League for 2024. With me in the chat is, to my whatever way that is on your screen, representing Hunter Western Hornets, is Mitch Walkaden. Welcome, Mitch.
Hello.
This backing up with your same form from your intro last time. And below me, down there, representing the South Queensland Sharks, is Mark Tipple. First time. Welcome, Mark.
Thanks, Tom. Hey, Mitch. Good to be here.
Hey, buddy.
I must apologise, Mark. It's your first time, but it shouldn't be because you've been very close to doing a bunch of things with us, and then at the last minute, I seem to be the one that cancels on you. So it's good to finally have you here.
No. And I just want to say, after doing quite a bit of stuff in different parts of the world this past year, Tom, it's awesome what you're doing with touchscreen. It's so cool to see how widely spread your videos and your information and education is getting. So
Yeah, I
keep up
appreciate
the
that.
good
Thank
work.
you.
Good to be here.
Keep saying those things, Mark. He'll always have you back.
It's actually funny. As of recent, the people that are saying that they watch the video the most are referees. So that's interesting. I didn't think I'd ever get those compliments from that group, but awesome. So what we're going to do is we're going to chat about the Opens divisions, just the three Opens divisions: men's, women's, and mixed. If we want to touch on the B division, that's fine. We don't have too many teams there. But yeah, we'll start with men's, and the idea here is probably just to talk about who we think our front runners are for at least semi-finals, top four maybe. Talk about our reasons why, and we don't have to rank them in particular. We could just probably pick our four best, and if we want to touch on any other teams, we can do that. So I've got the men's open list in front of me. I'll put it on the screen for you so you can see. Who would like to go first? Random
first,
generator?
Gee, being the 18s boys state champion as of yesterday, I'd love your expert opinion.
Thank you. I will go first, and thanks for that. So I look at both pools, and I think that Pool A is so much harder than Pool B. I think that the Hornets and the Sharks will finish 1-2 in Pool B in that order, whereas I find it a lot harder. And there'll be a theme with some of the club teams. Mark, you're from Queensland, so it's probably you got more knowledge of the players and who plays where and other bits and pieces. But trying to line up.
Saying I'm from Queensland, but I get what you mean.
You spend a little bit of time there. You're not a full-blown Queenslander, but like trying to line up how the UQ Rebels, as an example, are going to play. And you have a look at who's playing for them. You have to then cross-reference, who's played for them in the past and other bits and pieces. Whereas I think Pool A with the Bulls, the Swans, the Mets, the Rebels, there's two Rebels actually, is a very, very hard pool. Whereas Pool B is slightly easier. I do see the Bulls and the Swans getting through, and I'd sort of think the Hornets and the Sharks will get through on Pool B.
Do you agree with that one, Mark?
I like the way you're thinking. It's interesting. I guess the way I sort of have broken it down, if we're looking at top four, my clear top three, CQ Bulls, Hunter Western Hornets, and South Queensland Sharks. And if you look at the title winners since 2019, they've shared all the titles since then. Sharks had that 1 year, and then over the past sort of 8 to 10 years, Bulls have obviously been the number one region in the country, with the Hornets right there behind them and taking a couple of victories over that time as well. So I still see all those teams as the front runners. Then I've got a list of 7 teams that I think are all competing for that 4th spot. And we know, just like North Queensland Men's Open did the other year, where they shocked people and made it to that was that 2020 maybe? That came out of nowhere, and anything can happen at NTL. But for mine, I've got a list of 7 competing for that 4th spot. So Swans for me would be the front runners. They've gotten, they made the semis last year with those other 3, and then they've only gotten better. You look at Blaze Prendergast, who's just playing amazing touch for a 19-year-old, just finished Aussie Mixed Open camp. Sam Carmody's in there, Jake Notley, Australian Men's Open. Like Swans have only gotten better. Townsville, UQ, Scorps have another solid team. And Pineapples have really pulled together another strong team with a couple of former Sharks players playing there. And then you can't write off Mets, coached by Scott Buckley. You got Jaden Ashby in there. A few of our Dolphins/Hornets boys are playing. I think 3 of our Dolphins State Cup winners are playing for them as well. But
Yeah,
I just think they might lack a little bit of strike, the Mets. But, for me, I've got those other 7 in a really interesting group. And for mine, the most competitive across the board men's open category we've seen for years.
Yeah.
Mm.
So I definitely agree with your top 3. I think it's very, very tough to split the Bulls, the Hornets, and the Sharks up. And it's good because they all kind of play different styles. Bulls, they're just, the Bulls just seem to be always in sync with each other. I really enjoy watching the Bulls play, but when you say you got 7 teams going for that 4th spot, I'm going to say, if I had to say one team, I'd say Swans. But I think the Mets versus Swans game in the round games is something that I'll make sure that I'm there to watch. So hopefully that's live stream, because that will be an absolute cracker. But I do have probably Swans getting over them maybe by 1 or 2 tries in the end. It's funny though with the Swans, like being from the Newcastle area, we never actually hear their big name players actually around the touch football sort of media very often. I know, like you talked about Jake Notley before, but you always hear the big names from Sharks, the big names from Bulls, and sort of Swans are just sort of flying below that radar a little bit. So it wouldn't even surprise me if they came out and probably had a draw with the Bulls or something in the rounds. But yeah, I think they're playing very good.
I think one thing since spending more time in Queensland is there's so much talent in the Darling Downs region, which is sort of west of Brisbane. That's Ipswich, Toowoomba. And from a young age, they just play so much sport. They're super fit. But so many players and people will move from that country regional area to Brisbane or to other major cities. So there'll be so many players that we know that are quite big stars that have ended up playing for Brisbane or at Sharks and things like that. So I think a combination of a lot of those players going back and playing for their home region, and this is the same in the women's, plus the coaching and the development that's happened out there as well. So you've got Jimmy Hegedus for Swans as well, who's just playing amazing touch, Australian Mixed Open. As we
they're very
mentioned,
young
Jake,
side though, aren't they? Like Bailey Deacon would still be under 18. There's the Moores, Nolan. There's a few of them, have all been in these, Australian 18s, Australian 20s teams. I actually think that the reason why I think they would actually suit 20-minute halves. I think the switching to 15-minute halves actually hinders them because they're a younger team and they'd like to really run over the top of teams. Whereas, I don't think 5 minutes, some people might think it's here or there. I think it really helps the Sharks.
I agree.
I don't want to sort of poke the bear, but they're a bit older. Their men's open side is a bit older. So I think a shorter 5 minutes less for them helps them, whereas it's sort of it's not as advantageous for the other 3 teams that I've sort of like in the semis.
The thing with the Swans as well, and I failed to mention Lockie Pearce, obviously Australian Men's Open legend, back running with those guys as well. So I do think there's a pretty good balance, but I'm with you as well, Mitch. And a massive in for the Sharks, which was kind of kept undercover, was Australian Men's Open middle Hayden Moffat being brought in to come back and play for Sharks. He's played for Cobras for a number of years.
Yeah, I was going to say he's a Cobras. Yeah.
He's from the Redlands affiliate, so he's Sharks homegrown and grew up playing juniors for Sharks, but then just career-wise and timing-wise, he spent a lot of time playing in Brisbane with Country Club Colts as his Metro Cup team as well, and I've seen them train a bit and seen Hayden in action up close, and just to see when you see some of those Australian Opens middles who are just at the peak of their powers, fit as, fast as, and how they organise and control the game, it's just a sight to see. So I think he's a massive in. Josh Glacken's been playing great touch. He'll be another good worker, let alone obviously your Dayberg Muirs, Hennessy's and Normans that are running around for Sharks.
Sure.
Awesome. So, we just spoke about Cobras before. So, they UQ Rebels. I might be just totally oblivious to who they are. Who are the UQ Rebels? Because I've just looked in the program, but I can't see what UQ actually stands for.
Yeah, it's University of Queensland, and
so it is University of Queensland. Yeah, okay. So that's sort of everywhere.
Well, we could do a whole other video about, and Tom did. We'll shout out your video about the NTL format, and obviously this is the first year of the new format. UQ Rebels are actually a storied club in Queensland, originating. I won't go into it too much, but there was University of Queensland, and there was a separate club called Rebels, and a lot of the Gold Coast players before Gold Coast went into Metro Cup would play for Rebels. So UQ Rebels have a really strong history since Queensland State Cup started in 2019. They've been attending Queensland State Cups. Their women have won all but one of those Queensland State Cups, and their men have been in 2 grand finals in that time. So they're always sort of a top 2 or 3 team in Queensland in both men's and women's. And yeah, a very storied club / affiliate.
Cool. That's good. That's good.
And now Harry Griffin, is that right, Tip? Now Harry Griffin for the Bulls. Is he injured?
Harry Griffin did
coming
his
back
ACL.
From an injury.
Yeah, did his ACL in the Trans-Tasman last year, so he's right for the World Cup, but he's still on the road back.
Right.
I wonder if he would have played if the World Cup wasn't this year. I think he probably might have played, or might have been in the squad of 16 maybe. But I think just from what I would probably do is rest myself till the World Cup.
The other thing to note, they didn't have Harry at Queensland State Cup either. And Rockhampton, obviously, very similar team to the CQ Bulls, if not player for player, the same team. They still dominated. I think they might have dropped one game, they might have tied another, but then when the going got tough, like they came to the fore. And when you think about CQ Bulls and Rockhampton, you wonder how many games they've actually lost in the past 10 years. Like you could count them on 2 hands, which is phenomenal.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So Mark,
have you got the winning your... Sorry. Tom,
I was just going to say we might get Mark's sort of opinion on, even though you are sort of an ex-Hornets rep as well. Might get your opinion on the Hornets men's open teams, because me and Mitch will obviously be representing Hornets. So as unbiased as this trio can be, you're probably the one. What do you think about Hornets?
I was thinking about it. Like you think about how they went last year, and in that grand final, like they deserve to be grand finalists up against Bulls. But then in that grand final, it just didn't really look like they were ever in the match. And Bulls have that effect on teams, you know, they're so fit, they're so fast. There's bloody 6 or 7 absolute prototype touch players that they pour out, and you discover a new name from Bulls every year who just carves up, you know. So last year, I thought I was really impressed with Chris Lennon. Obviously, really made a name for himself at men's open level. Dylan Thompson, any team with him in it is a chance. Luke Kane has been named in his first Australian men's open team as well, and they've added Josh Moffat. I've mentioned 3 Dolphins boys once again, which is Mitch and I.
Oh boy.
It's our home affiliate. At the same time, like seeing those boys up close and personal and being in the box when they won state cup, they're just at the peak of their powers for young guys, let alone Jack Edwards, another Australian men's open player, Connor Edwards, amazing athlete. The list goes on. So Hornets touch, as you guys know, it's the strongest it's ever been. I think the Hornets are better than last year. I just think the different styles, the different personalities all coming into that team. There's big rivalries within the region, and how that'll play out during the matches, how it all gels for them. That'll be their biggest challenge. And Lindsay Brain, obviously Carly Banks is New South Wales men's open coach, so she had to step away from the Hornets men's open job, and that's Lindsay's first time being the man in charge. So how he can bring that all together with the senior leaders, and if they all choose to work together, for mine, I see Bulls and Sharks probably ahead of them because I'm just not sure how they'll gel.
Well, if I said that Swans and Mets are going to be the cracker of Pool A, I think Hornets Sharks round game, that'll probably give us a clear indication of where those guys are at. But I do think, I do think Hornets and Sharks are ahead in that pool. So you mentioned Cobras before. Have they split? Are they playing for other teams, or does anybody know? Because I know that in some women's divisions they're playing under Brisbane Metropolitan. I think that would be all the Cobras players.
It's interesting, Tom. We should do more videos. Just I think a lot of people would be interested around the world how touch works in Australia in general, and then I don't think a lot of people realise how segregated the New South Wales touch community is from the Queensland touch community. How the pathways are different.
Yeah,
The clubs and affiliates, they all work so differently. And I mean, the 2 major cities in touch essentially are Brisbane and Sydney. But since the 1970s, there's been pretty much one major affiliate in Brisbane, which is Brisbane Metropolitan Touch Association, servicing the whole city of 1.5 to 2 million people. Whereas in Sydney, how many affiliates would be in Sydney? So that alone has changed the dynamic of touch in South Queensland. And so now that affiliates can go as themselves instead of just Brisbane City Cobras, who BMTA fall under, BMTA have made that decision to send some teams themselves. UQ Rebels come out of that. And so that has affected a lot of teams that usually, a lot of players that would usually go for Cobras because they had the choice to go for their affiliate.
Well, just looking at the team now, it seems like Cobras still are sending like 16 teams, so they've still got plenty of teams going there at least. So that's good.
Sure. And that was another interesting thing is Scorpions as well. Like with the change, obviously, Scorps, I saw a post they put up that they're sending the most teams they ever have as well. And it's the biggest NTL ever with the most teams. So that's going to be interesting too.
Yeah, hopefully we can get a park.
Good luck.
All right. All right. So do we have anything else on the men's divisions we'd like to touch on? I will say that it's great to see Singapore and Japan. Hopefully they do. I know it's got men's open B next to Singapore, but I do hope on the Sunday they organise a sort of an international game like they did. To be honest, I haven't watched the Queensland State Cup, but they did that at New South Wales where they had the international teams playing against each other on the Sunday morning, which was good. A lot of people got around and watched it.
So well, mate, you've got the
definitely. I think
on speed dial. You could sort of just shoot him a message, give him a few prompts.
Who's that? I must have been
You
talking at
did
the
a
same
tell-all.
time.
No, you did a tell-all. With Jamie O'Connor, the
Oh,
head honcho, mate.
probably should have.
CEO.
Should have mentioned. Well, I
Hard-hitting
didn't.
interview.
I don't think I realised who was actually at the time. We didn't have the team list there. He just told me the amount of teams, but I definitely would have mentioned it. But I'm sure they're going to do something like that. It'd be silly not to.
Sure.
Right, let's go. How about we go to the women's?
Do we have winners? So Tipple, do you think the Bulls are winning again?
I've got the Bulls with a 3-peat win this year.
And Tom?
I have no idea. No idea. I would say that if I was running sports bet, I would have the Bulls at favourites.
Yeah, of course.
Mitch?
I think the Hornets can turn it around. I think they'll reverse the result from last year.
Hope so, but I wouldn't be
You know
surprised
it,
if it is the same grand final. All
And
right.
I hope I don't get in trouble for sharing my honest opinion, especially when I'm wearing this shirt and friends with people
Absolutely.
in other teams.
Well, I'm wearing this shirt.
Absolutely not.
Oh, yeah, nice.
It just goes with
It
the
looks
colour.
like
I'll just keep the
Yeah.
badge just down here. Shout out to Barry Nichols who gave me this shirt. Hence why it's triple XL.
And
All
just on the Sharks, well, just to finish, sorry.
You're right.
It's a scary thing ruling out any team that includes Jermaine Daybog-Muir, Dylan Hennessy, Peter Norman, Hayden Moffat.
Yeah.
So
the top 20 list I did, we've just sort of avoided the fact that the top 3 in that list are all playing for the Sharks.
Exactly.
All righty. Bringing up Women's Open now. So Pool A, Pool B, and 2 Women's Open B teams. I'm not sure how they're going to work that with the 2 teams, whether or not they still play everyone else and they just have their own final.
I think that's the format.
Sure.
They play everyone once. So, Western Australia will play their 7, 6 or 7 games. And then they'll just have a grand final against the Moorabbin Lions.
Hopefully we pronounce that right. Apologies if we don't. All right, so who kicked us off last time? Was it Mitch? Mark, do you want to go first? I'm happy to go first with mixed.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, Women's Open, once again, going to be really interesting. No South Queensland Sharks, who have been up there and amongst it, winning a few titles, obviously, the past few years under head coach Renee Murphy. She's gone with her affiliate and at least half the Sharks women's team who are playing as UQ Rebels, who they play with at Queensland State Cup and Brisbane's Metro Cup. So they instantly, for me, go into a top 2 spot. If we're talking about sports betting, for mine, I've got my money. I would put my money on Sydney Scorpions being defending champions. Once again, I thought about when was the last time Danny Davis, Hannah Dyball, and Sammy Rogers would have lost a tournament together? Like, even though Danny's moved to Queensland for 5 years, you still think it goes a long way back.
I actually think, did I see that Sam Rogers is not playing?
Well, that might be the chance.
Well, she was named originally. She was named, and then I just had a quick look at the teams before this this chat, and I think she's named as assistant coach. Wasn't sure. Maybe she's saving herself for the World Cup or carrying a little niggly injury or something like that. But that's interesting. That I had absolutely no idea. That I was wondering where the Sharks went, but now University of Queensland, that makes a lot of sense, and they jump up my rankings if that was the case as well. Did Sharks, were they missing any players last year? Do you know?
They were, and obviously Danny had gone back to play with her sister and the Scorps girls, where she's from too. Sharks were a little underdone with a little understrength with some pregnancies and things like that going on too. So they didn't have their full team, but I would say that UQ Rebels do. I think looking at the Scorps women's team, we mentioned Danny Norman, Nee Davis, her sister Shelley Davis, Hannah Dyball, who is a top 3 player in the world. And then Mackenzie Davis. I'm sure you guys have seen her come through the ranks in junior touch
I had
from Hills Hornets and through Scorps.
the pleasure of coaching against Mackenzie last year, and it's not something I'd like to do again in the near future.
Mate, that was the most dominant performance we've ever seen in women's 20s from her last year. She's been plying her trade a little bit in rugby sevens and just casually started playing rugby sevens and played for Australia at the Youth Commonwealth Games and things like that. So that's the level of talent. She's an absolute superstar. So her being added, there's a good mixture of youth and experience in that Scorps team. And I just put them ahead of UQ because even though UQ have played together a little bit, that core, and it's very interesting to see a Queensland state champion come up against a national champion. Danny and those girls are going to be so hard to beat. Behind them, I've got Swans, who I mentioned are going to be really strong and surprise a lot of people. Sunshine Coast Pineapples, who play a lot of touch up here, the core play for Caboolture, and are essentially the second-ranked Queensland team at Queensland State Cup and Metro Cup. And then the dark horse, you guys will be able to tell me more about the Hornets team, but the dark horse, obviously coached by Harry Berryman, is the Northern Beaches Renegades, with half the whānau in that team, with a lot of those true blue Northern Beaches players that have come through the grades. They're going to be hard to beat, and were unlucky at New South Wales State Cup too.
Yeah, I've never seen a more dominant grand final than when the Scorps beat the Hornets last year in the Women's Opens grand final. They absolutely smashed them. And I think that the Scorps will win again, and I think they'll beat the UQ Rebels. My losing semi-finalist, it's funny, I've got the Renegades. I think they will go fairly deep. Harry loves reminding me that I said that his men's opens were no chance before State Cup. And I think I might have quoted a hypothetical $41, and they got to the semi-finals. And then the other team that I just had
Mitch, and that semi-final, I believe they were very unlucky because it poured down rain, and it made it very difficult for anyone to play touch. So a fast track, it could have been very different. Sorry, keep going.
No, but the good news for your thousands of viewers, Tom, is that my tips are normally rubbish. So whatever I say is, doesn't really hold a lot of. I actually think the Southern Rebels, which is a mix of Canterbury and Easts, and I think that they might go okay as well. So in terms of my top, rounding out the top 4, I think the Rebels and the Renegades will be the losing semi-finalists. I think Rebels will definitely play Scorps in the grand final. I can't see Scorps getting beaten.
Yeah, I agree there. I think that's probably most likely to be the grand final, Scorps versus UQ Rebels. Scorps have just been very dominant the last a lot of years since Elite 8 was finished. It's always been Scorps, and usually it's Sharks up there as well. But like Mark touched on there, they were missing a few players last year. Rounding out the semi-finals, I've got Renegades as well. Just because I think it's a big advantage having a group of players together since September, playing through Vorden Cup, State Cup, and continuing that sort of role. And to be honest, I'm struggling with the fourth team. Pineapples are a good chance. I know Raiders made the semi-final a few years back, and I think as far as consistency, their team hasn't really changed, so they're not really worrying about losing dominant players or anything like that. So I wouldn't be surprised if I reckon they'll make the quarters, whether or not they go from there. Victoria Storm seem to be seated quite high. I'm not actually sure how they did last year. But yeah, I think Pineapples. I think Pineapples is the pick there. Semi-finalists. Oh, were they semi-finalists last year? Or maybe were they Oh, then again, I'm
I'm
completely
not
missing
sure.
out.
I'm sorry.
Completely missing out
Might
on
be
the
wrong there.
Swans there. It's a tough pick, that fourth spot. Let's just say that. But it could, like you said, Southern Rebels, Brisbane Metropolitan could come out and completely surprise me, which if they do, that's awesome because the more unpredictability it is in touch footy, the more interesting it gets.
UQ Rebels as well. I'm counting maybe 5 Australian Women's Open players going to the World Cup this year.
Is that all?
At least another 1 mixed open player. So half your team is going to the World Cup in the Opens. And I said a lot of those girls have played for Sharks in the past or grew up playing for Sharks. Hinarangi, Andrea San, Sammy Jo Curtis, and you've got Beck Mai there, Marama Thomas, Tiani Bryce, like the list goes on. But they play such a good, smart style of touch under Renee Murphy as well, who's Australian Women's Open assistant coach. And I think they will impress a lot of people from New South Wales and from around the country that might not have watched much Queensland State Cup with their fast style. And it will be a very contrasting style compared to what Scorps and what Beaches play as well. So that'll be fun to watch. And honestly, I can't really split UQ when I read that team list out. Can't split UQ and Scorps at the moment.
Sharks
Scorps ahead
won.
slightly because they're defending champions.
Sharks won in 2022 against Scorps. That was a really, really good game. That was, I think it was only like 6-5 or something. How many Aussie players did you say Sharks had? 5?
UQ Rebels this year have at least 5 wins open.
Yeah, sorry. Apologies. UQ Rebels. 5.
Yeah.
Okay, and Scorps have got 4. 2 mixed open, 2 women's open. So pretty much a World Cup preview when the Scorps play the Rebels. Yeah, that's very exciting. It's good to see the girls and the guys as well. They're not sort of pulling out of this tournament just because the World Cup's on. They're trying to get plenty of touch footy in, and it's good for NTLs as well.
Well, the championships, as it's known, Tom.
Is it though? It still says NTL on all the logos though.
I've been encouraged to call it the championships, but then even the logo says NTL championships.
Yeah. Sorry, I am just Googling where Moorabbin is. Oh, it's
It's in Victoria.
Southeast Melbourne.
Yes, mate. The Lions.
Melbourne.
I think they were formerly called the Melbourne City Lions. There's definitely a connection there because Elias Al-Shah and Leah Percy, his partner, who's playing for them. Elias is coaching. Leah was Australian Women's Open coach, and there's quite a few Victorian touch legends playing for that team as well. So it's pretty cool that they get to go too.
It's good to see Victorian and even like WA and at some degree Tasmania touch actually growing as much. We just had NYC last year, and I think WA and Tasmania sent every division at NYC from 12s to 18s, both genders. So it's really good. It's really good to see that. Righto. What we might do, it says we've only got 90 seconds left on this time. Do you want to jump off and jump back on and we'll talk mixed?
Sure.
Sounds good.
Righto. I'll stop the recording here and I'll stitch it up to the end. All right, let's jump back on.